Thank you for joining us for this 24 Plus News Update. I'm Ruben Diaz. We're on top of major developments out of Tennessee's capital that can impact voters here in Shelby County. Now, a bill to redraw the U.S. congressional map and reshape districts across the state passed State House and Senate committees today. This issue sparked heated debate inside the Capitol and ongoing protests outside as well. ABC 24's Lauren Turman is live in Nashville to help break down everything that happened today. Lauren?
Yes, Ruben, so there is a lot to get to here because there is a lot that happened today. So I'm going to start you earlier in the day and then bring you through this afternoon as to what exactly happened in the Tennessee House and Senate committees and how this is going to especially reshape what we may be seeing tomorrow. Now, just to tell you earlier, I said earlier today that this day was about committees. It was about learning more about what exactly is being presented here. And for the first time, we really saw a definitive map of this redrawing of congressional districts across the state of Tennessee, and specifically the impact of it on Memphis and Shelby County. So I'm going to walk you through that in just a bit. But several of these bills passed through House and Senate committees today, starting in the morning and going through the afternoon as well. So it has been a very busy day. You also mentioned protests, which I will touch on a bit later, and how some of these protests disrupted the Senate Judiciary Committee meeting that happened today as well. Now, just to walk back a little bit as to what we have learned today, especially since the morning, again, we saw that congressional redistricting map. We saw exactly what the impact will look like across counties in Tennessee, and specifically how this will impact Shelby County, so I'm going to walk you through that. This would divide Memphis and Shelby County into 3 separate districts. That's District 5, District 8, and District 9. District 9, as we know it now, which represents Memphis and much of Shelby County, would completely be restructured into extending into the southern central part of Tennessee and more of the middle Tennessee areas, reaching as far as Bedford and Moore counties. It would really encompass the lower half and only a small part of Memphis and Shelby County, really barely touching into the county as things stand right now. And again, completely reshaping what we now know as District 9. Now, we heard from plenty of people during testimony today, during Senate and House committee meetings. They've gone through a wide range of meetings today since the morning and spanning into the afternoon. We heard from former Georgia State Representative Stacey Abrams. We also heard testimony from Representative Steve Cohen, who this will be directly impacting, and longtime civil rights attorney Walter Bailey, just a couple of people who came and shared why they are so concerned about this redistricting plan. And a lot of the argument that has been said by Tennessee's Democrats, specifically those who are taking part in this special session right now, we've heard since yesterday that they believe that this map really eliminates minority voices, specifically black voter voices in a majority black city and in a majority black county. They are also saying that the impact is immediate not only on Memphis, Shelby County, but also all of the surrounding counties in Tennessee, because several of these counties, approximately 42 since we've last seen the reporting, will be impacted by this redistricting if this plan goes through tomorrow. Now, just to tell you a little bit more about what we touched on earlier, specifically about the protest, again, people have been here since yesterday making their voices loud. We saw around 1,000 people yesterday rallying outside of the state capitol and then eventually making their way back into the state capitol. But today, their voices actually disrupted some of the Senate Judiciary meeting that started around 11 a.m. and they went into recess because of the amount of noise that they were making as they were really in and outside of those rooms. They started in the room and then eventually had to move outside. But they were saying that this is just something that they are really looking forward to in all of this, is having everybody be together and their voices being heard at this time, and that they didn't mind the disruption because it means that all of these senators heard what they had to say. And many of them tell me that that's really the goal of them being here, is to make their voices heard and to make it known that they do not want this as Tennesseans, and they are not advocating for this redrawing of the congressional map in Tennessee. Now, again, just to walk you through some of the really important things that were said here, we heard again from Senator London Lamar. We also heard from Senator Ramesh Akbari, who have been talking since the press conference yesterday and really trying to hammer down the points of elimination of minority voting power that they believe this redistricting plan would bring. But again, we did also hear testimony specifically from former Georgia State Representative Stacey Abrams, who said that this is a plan that eliminates creates the sole Democratic district within the state of Tennessee, and that this is telling Tennesseans that even just one Democratic congressional district is too much at this time, and believing that the diversity of voices in Washington, D.C. is too much at this time. So those are just a couple of some of the important points, but I do want you to hear some of the exchange that happened in the Senate chamber, as well as some more of the reaction and testimony that came down today during those committees. Take a listen.
Why did you split the black vote up almost exactly in the three districts? Because you wanted to minimize it and kill it. Those are impossible districts to be able to campaign and meet with people and have town halls and have people come. It defeats the whole idea of democracy. The tail of the comet gets nothing because it has no say in the primary election where the Republican winner will be the congressperson, gets no say, and they will be on the back of the bus, just like the South did to African Americans for half a decade when they had buses. You go to the back of the bus until Rosa said no.
And I also will add something that I took away from a lot of these committees today. I listened to several of them, both in the House and the Senate, as many of them were going on at the same time. And one thing that I heard specifically on the Senate side of things, the Senate sponsor of the bill, Senator John Stevens, was really drilled on a lot of these questions pertaining to the budget, how much this would cost Tennessee's counties. He was also asked about the racial makeup, specifically of Memphis and Shelby County, and some other questions that are pertaining to the voters that are really important in some of these counties. He either opted out of answering some of those questions or repeated the same answer over and over again. And so a lot of the senators did not feel like he was answering their questions at all, and even said that they did not believe that he, as the sponsor of the bill, knew much about the background of the bill at this time. So that was something that kept on happening and was pretty consistent throughout all of these committees. But again, this is something that we will continue to see resurfacing because we are expecting a final vote on this plan to happen tomorrow. The House still has one more committee that they have to get through during the day, and then all of this will reconvene tomorrow morning for those House and Senate floor sessions. Ruben?
All right, Lauren, first of all, great job. There's a lot of information to unpack, so great job delivering that information. Let's talk a little bit more about the protesters and the interruptions. You mentioned that they actually interrupted the session today. Can you walk us through a little bit about what the protesters were saying and why it got so loud?
Yes, and we actually talked to a lot of those protesters immediately after that happened and got more of what they had to say and their take on things there. And so a lot in these Senate chambers and the House chambers, right outside, a lot of these protesters were either cheering on specifically Democratic senators that they feel will vote in opposition of this redrawing plan, or they were booing Republican senators who they felt would vote in support of this redistricting plan. Now, that is important because they say that it is something that is necessary to make their voices heard in this entire process. As you mentioned, a lot of them initially started inside of that Senate Judiciary Committee meeting, but because of some of the noise that was being made, they said that they were then kicked outside of that meeting, but they still continued to protest. They still continued to shout at those people who were entering in and out of the doors who they agreed with or they didn't agree with. They still continued to support one another and really rally around one another as they were trying to get their message across to the senators today. And that is really also very reminiscent of what we saw yesterday as well, that same kind of action outside of the Senate chamber as all of those senators were walking by. They were speaking directly to them, chanting, shouting at them, trying to get their message across. And that is something that I also continue to see probably into tomorrow when that final vote is expected to be made. So really what they have been driving home to me and saying to me is that they hope that they are on the right side of history in this. They hope that future generations of people will see how hard they fought at the state capitol, regardless of the way this goes. And they hope that this may inspire people in other states who may eventually go through the same thing to stand up and specifically stand up for one another, everybody who is here, everybody who is trying to make their voices known and heard so well, that this is just the start of a movement for them. And they've really been emphasizing that to me between yesterday and today. Ruben?
All right, Lauren, one more question before we let you go. I know you've been working all morning long. We appreciate it. So far we've heard a lot from Memphians and people here in the Mid-South about why they don't want this to happen, right? Like what it does to the black vote, what it does to the minority vote in the area. On the Republican side of that, we have heard a lot about that it's just about Republican seats, right? So what was the defense for redrawing those maps today that you were able to hear from basically the Republican side of this?
So really, Ruben, there wasn't too much in terms of the support or why this may be favorable. That was emphasized over and over again, but I will say, as I mentioned earlier, specifically when the Senate bill sponsor was asked about those things, he did say, Tennessee is a Republican state, Tennessee is a conservative state, and I believe the conservative voices should be sent to Washington. And that was really it, essentially what he said. And so there wasn't really much more depth or explanation provided. It was really just the emphasis of a conservative state should equal conservative voices in their vantage point. And again, there were a lot of Senate Democrats who tried to drill them on some of that, who tried to ask them some of those points. Why is this favorable financially? Why is this favorable racially? Why is this favorable to voters? And some of those questions did not get answered at all, or some of the same answers were repeated over and over again, specifically within Senate committees. So that was something that was a very stark difference that I did note. But really, as I just mentioned, the equation of conservative voices and having the only current Democratic district be turned into a Republican district, and having that voice be in Washington, D.C. is really why they wanted to emphasize this. Now, I also want to tell you about one more thing, because I know that we are about to wrap up here shortly. Part of what I just mentioned and some of those questions that they were asked was about the finances behind this, which hasn't really been touched on too much in all of the noise about the, specifically about racial impact, specifically about the impact on voters, which are of course all very important points. But I also want to talk to you about some of the fiscal impact that we just learned about within the past few hours in the Senate Finance, Ways and Means Committee. In terms of what they have told me and in terms of what they had said in all of that meeting, they specifically mentioned $315 million that would be appropriated to reimburse counties for any cost that is incurred for this redistricting. And so that is expected to roll out and be reimbursed over a period of time. We also did see the fiscal note in all of this, and $500,000 in expenditures are expected to be incurred for this current fiscal year. So that means around $500,000 will have to be spent more than likely out of pocket from counties or county election commissions. There was also several $100,000 that would also be incurred for different IT systems that would have to be used in this redistricting process. So that is could potentially be $750,000 out of pocket for many of these counties. Of course, that depends on the size of the county and the way that it is made up, but that is important in talking about this, right? Because there is an entire committee that is devoted to going over the fiscal impact of all of this and what that would be. And it does seem like there is a pretty significant cost that would be incurred up front and then reimbursed to many of these counties. So I did want to make that note, because that is something that we are just learning about over the past few hours here. But yes, as the days have gone on, we've seen lots of response from both sides of this, specifically from many of the people who are opposed to this redistricting plan. And so, of course, this all comes down to tomorrow when that final vote will be taken. Ruben.
All right, thank you so much, Lauren. We're gonna let you go now. We appreciate all the work you've done. You've obviously got a lot of time and energy spent into this subject, a very difficult subject to address nonetheless. All right, thank you so much, Lauren Turman, for that report from Nashville. All right, that's gonna do it for our special here about this event happening on Nashville, the special session happening in Nashville. We'll continue to follow this and have more for you tonight coming up at 5, 6, and 10.